In a world filled with noise, with fear, with uncertainty, with doubt, how do you stay grounded? How do you stay focused? How do you stay hopeful? And more importantly, how do you keep moving forward when everything around you feels like it could feel like it's falling apart? Hey, I'm JRLA. Welcome to another Level Up Business podcast. Today, we're going to be diving into a topic that hits close to home for many entrepreneurs: how to grow through chaos. Not just survive chaos, but truly transform through chaos so you can thrive in a time of chaos. Joining me for today's conversation is Darren Violette. Darren is a financial advisor, growth strategist, and someone who knows firsthand what it means to battle self-doubt, to rebuild from failure, and to commit to becoming 1% better every single day. Before we get into the conversation with Darren, if you're a B2B entrepreneur, I'm willing to bet that you have unique wisdom. You have a unique story just like the one that Darren is going to share today. Maybe you've thought about sharing that story. Maybe you've thought about sharing your perspective, recording content, posting video on social media, or perhaps you've thought about writing a best-selling book. But the problem is you let self-limiting beliefs stop you. You let self-limiting beliefs keep you from sharing your unique wisdom, from telling your story to help others level up their business. So if you're thinking about how to elevate your brand, how to increase your revenue, send me a text right now, 832-240-1922. And I'm going to show you how easy it is to turn video content into a best-selling book just simply by having a conversation like the one that I'm having with Darren. Welcome to the show, Darren. It is good to hang out with you, buddy.
Yeah, you too. You too. How you been?
Man, I've been so well, and I'm so happy you're here to talk about growth in what can feel like very chaotic times. You've been sharing some really good perspective on LinkedIn. You wrote, "In a world of doomsayers, choose to be hopeful." And I want to start there because it's so easy to turn the news on, which I don't, but I understand if you do. What are you hopeful about right now in a world that can feel very chaotic and confusing?
I think the way where I start with that is to try to really avoid a lot of the noise that's out there, right? Because it's so easy to fall into the trap of the country's going to, hell in a handbasket, or, we're going into trade wars, we're going into all this stuff that's negative. But I look at it as those are completely things that are outside my realm of control. So what can I control? Those are the things I'm going to work on and be hopeful for. So, I work on my health. I work on my relationships. I work on my spiritual life. I work on my business. I work, my marriage. And I look at those and say, all of those have an amazing future. And because I actually can influence those, I can control those, I can work on those. I have nothing to do with what's going on with us in China. I can't do a blessed thing about that.
I appreciate that. That's a very stoic philosophy. Control what you can control, manage what you can manage. And I know one of the areas that you have been working on controlling is your own personal growth, your own personal development. Something else you had shared, and I want to take you back, and I'm going to read this for context for those who are watching and listening, because when you wrote this, I said, wow, there's a lot of progress here. You wrote 4 years into this career, that was a massive failure. Last week, I was able to share with a colleague about how I shouldn't still be a financial advisor. After expenses, I was likely making below minimum wage and had no idea what to do to change the direction of my business and my career. Yet against all better judgment, I chose to not quit. I chose to keep going. It wasn't fast. It wasn't easy. It wasn't all glory, but business started happening. I started to build relationships. I started to grow. It was nearly 8 years from my start that I started earning enough to call it a quote-unquote living. It was still more than surviving and thriving, but it's progress. And so when you were at that point, take us back. What was life like for you back then as an early entrepreneur? Because that's who listens to this. It's B2B entrepreneurs.
You know, again, sometimes it's easy to see things in other people and go, oh man, what a dumb excuse. How, why are we doing that? Why are you thinking that way? And then you see it in yourself and realize how hypocritical you can be. Where I was still, as a young adult entering this business, the little kid getting picked on at school. So I had zero confidence in any social setting. I probably still struggle a little bit with that if I'm being completely honest, where I don't approach people, I won't go up and talk to them, I won't take risks in relationships. I was way worse back then. And so you don't build a business sitting there not talking to anybody. So I spent all my time learning my business, but I didn't have anyone to share it with. And so
Was it learning? Is it fair to say that you were learning the craft, learning the craft? That was the combination of trade and craft. I just made up a word. You were learning the trade, you were learning the craft, but there's a whole other side to this as well. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, you look at, you have the knowledge, you have the information, but financial success doesn't sit in information. It really is, you have to lead a transformation for your client. So that's really where I was lacking, is I would share all kinds of charts and details and numbers, and I was right, but nobody was taking any action because people aren't obsessed with numbers. And what does it mean about their life? How are you painting a picture of their future? How are you communicating to people? That's what I was missing, because that's in relationship, that's in conversation, and I wasn't developed there at that point.
So it's interesting what you said about the knowledge. It reminds me of something that I wrote about in Banking on Change, to where you have these 4 seasons that lead to exponential growth. And exponential growth I define as when an individual, a leader, an entrepreneur, even a team, an organization is growing personally and professionally at the same exact time. In those 4 seasons, there's a season to learn, there's a season to think, there's a season to do, and there's a season to review. And so the learning and thinking leads to the knowing, the doing and the reviewing leads to the growing. So if you think about the knowing, that's the awareness piece. The growing, that's the transformation. But to bridge the gap in the middle requires one thing. It's commitment. So awareness plus commitment equals transformation. If you strip all that out, what do you have to do? You have to do one thing to continue to grow. You have to act. ACT, awareness plus commitment equals transformation. I think it's interesting, and can we go back even further now? Because you unlocked something that really, it resonated with me. You talked about the lack of confidence you felt as a kid. Because, dude, I was there with you.
It's
take us
hard
back.
to let it stay there, isn't it?
Yeah, take us back. What was growing up like for you?
It wasn't awesome, I will say.
Sure.
I had a pretty tumultuous home life, in that we're incredibly blessed that my father quit drinking like 35 years ago or more now. But
Yeah.
prior to that, it was not a great household. In some ways, I say I've had 3 dads, right? I had drinking dad, I had non-drinking dad who became a super guy, very helpful, like just did so much for me. And then I also now have Christian dad, who just changed again dramatically in his 70s, and when he came to faith, and just it's been amazing to watch his change, but not his story today.
Sure.
But
His story impacts your story, just like we're all interconnected in some way, shape, form, or fashion.
yeah, but those early years of just all that was going on in our house, I brought a lot of that to school with me, acted out a lot. I was the kid that if I got a 92 on the math test, I was literally crying when I was a kid. You can imagine how your classmates handle that, with compassion and love and empathy, or they just pick on you, and just,
Right.
So, yeah, I didn't control my temper well. So I was the picked on kid. I sort of joke, I was the kid that got straight A's with glasses, braces, overweight, not a lot of friends. I had all the recipe for being picked on, and they took full advantage. So,
Well, I feel you and I understand you, because I was right there with you. But it's interesting that you're the kid who got a 92 and you'd cry. I was a kid that got a 92, and I'd come home and my mom was like, well, you can do better. You can do better. So I was living in a world that it was never good enough, no matter what I did for that fact. And that created a confidence complexity in my own self that was ripe for getting, and I'm going to quote Good Charlotte here, getting picked on and picked last, I think from their very first album. But let's flash forward, because you're not the same person.
No.
You've grown, you've progressed. I'm not the same person. And I think that's part of the entrepreneurial journey. I remember hearing from, I think it was Bedros Keuilian. One of the things that I learned from him, he said, if you want to self-develop as a human being, work out, become an entrepreneur. Like, that's the best way to self-develop. And I want to come back to your story, because you said by year 14, something clicked. You wrote, I realized that my lack of growth was entirely my fault. I started getting constant coaching, started reading personal and professional development. And this is what I loved. You said, I made sure I never stopped learning. What was the shift for you that you were like, I've had enough?
So 2019 was the year, and it was the most challenging business year I ever had. My business partner and I were preparing to make a massive change in our business, and I had really stepped aside from being in the business to do all of the prep work that we needed to make this change. Huge step back financially as we were working on this, and we got to the fall, and for a whole host of reasons, that fell apart. Our business relationship fell apart, and he decided to go one direction and I went another, and we completely split up. Fortunately, now we actually still work together, just in a very different capacity. We're still very good friends. It wasn't a personal thing, it was just a business thing. And I was now a financial advisor on my own with no partner. I had spent time in agency management in a number of different capacities and whatnot over the years. So this was really the first time I was genuinely and truly on my own. And I had the sort of crisis of confidence of, do I need those crutches of having a management position, a salary position, a partner, or am I actually good enough to just go do this on my own? And fortunately, I actually said to myself, there's only one way to know, and to put your head down and really actually do the work. You just talked a minute ago about you have to act. I acted. I actually went in and put my head down and said, I'm just not going to lift my head for a year or two and just do the work. And, when I was thinking through kind of preparing for this, I was thinking, that's when I had Goggins in my head saying, you tend to quit at about 40% of your capacity. Darren Hardy talking about the compound effect of just doing it over and over, and that little bit of growth, and James Clear being 1% better every day, and the others telling me to stop listening to myself and start talking to myself, and just that personal development, constant podcast, constant reading, and just doing the work. And you didn't even notice it day by day. But all of a sudden I woke up, and I'm part of a larger firm with 80 or 90 advisors, and now I'm sitting on panels of like the top 3, 4, 5 folks being asked, how'd you do it? And I don't know. I didn't even realize it happened until it did. And you have to kind of go back and recreate it through some of these stories, because I've gone more than 4x my business in the last 5 years, and I was afraid of failing in 2019. And now I feel foolish for that I felt like that.
Right.
But I'm not who I was then.
Hey, it's JR, and I want to thank you for taking a few minutes out of your day to learn and grow with Darren. If you're a B2B entrepreneur and want to take your business to the next level, if you want to level up your business, I'm willing to bet that you have unique wisdom, just like the wisdom that Darren is sharing with us today. But you're letting self-limiting beliefs stop you. You're letting self-limiting beliefs stop you from hitting the record button to share video. You're letting self-limiting beliefs stop you from writing a best-selling book. That's because you tell yourself things. You lie to yourself. You tell yourself, I don't have time. No one's going to listen to me. I'm not that smart. The world doesn't need another book. But here's the thing. These are all lies. And I want you to stop lying to yourself right now. In fact, I used to tell myself these exact same lies. But then I had a mentor, David C. Baker. He told me, JR, if you want to grow your business, if you want to level up your business, you're going to have to write a book. That's why I want to help you do the same, because I've done it for myself. That's why I've made it easy. I've made it quick and easy for B2B entrepreneurs to turn video content into best-selling books simply by having a conversation just like the one that I'm having with Darren right now. So text me right now, 832-240-1922, and I'm going to show you how easy it is to get started in just 15 minutes. Now let's get back to the conversation with Darren. And that's a key point. You're not who you were back then. You're not who you were as a child growing up. It's and I'll frame it the way that I did. And I was literally last night having a conversation with my father. And he said, I don't understand what you're trying to communicate. So my relationship with my parents is conflicted, is a good way, because we view the world from very different lenses. I love them, I honor them, I respect them, but we're just living very different lives. And I think a lot of it has just been my own personal entrepreneurial journey, the growth that I've experienced. And for a long time, that would make me feel sad and upset and frustrated. But it was such a great conversation last night, because I said, listen, Dad, every morning I wake up, I died to myself from the day before. I'm not the same person I was yesterday, and tomorrow when I wake up, I will not be the same person I was today. I literally have died every single night. And then I wake up, and if I can just find one space in my life, one place, just to be 1% better than I was the day before, well, then that's going to compound, back to your point, over time. James Clear writes about this in Atomic Habits. When you think back of your own growth, your own progress, I mean, even going back to just 2019 at this point, where do you feel you've made the biggest transformations along your journey here?
I think part of it is it's hard to put into words, but it's who you are when you show up. Right. So when I'm in a meeting with a client now, I'm not simply trying to educate them. I'm not trying to just give them information. I'm not trying to just lay out options. I'm trying to lead them. And I think that's what people want from us in business, is they want something that they don't have. That's why they come to you. They don't need 17 different, well, you could do this, this, or that. They say, this is what you need to do to be successful. And that way of being, whether it's with my team internally, whether it's with clients, colleagues, I think that's the largest change I've made. I just have that confidence to go, this is the right thing to do. This is what you should do.
Something else too, and it's interesting that you surfaced that, but I want to perhaps loop some progress back of how you're showing up for this conversation, which is right in line with how you show up. You mentioned before you had a very hard time connecting with people, even with clients, and you're showing up, you're here, you're present. I feel you. What shifted there? Because that seems like it was a growth opportunity for you 5, 6, 7 years ago.
I'm not sure. I hadn't even considered it until you asked that I had made progress there. It's probably something I'm not even aware that I did make progress in. Considering the question, I'm sure I have. I think part of it is as you get more successful in different areas, you do see how people see you. You do see how people talk about you. You see how people respond to you. even seek you out. And I think it's a little bit of that sort of the extrinsic ways that it came to me, but then it starts to become more internalized, and you just get more comfortable with kind of who you have become, and you're less likely to listen to those old stories because you're like, those are lies. Yeah, and they still come in sometimes, but it's easier to call them lies.
Okay, well let's call some lies out, shall we, right now? What was a lie that you used to tell yourself that you know now is just a lie?
If I was in a setting, a lot of business settings you're in, there'd be 50 or 100 people in a room. I would stand by myself and wait for someone to come up and talk to me, because in my head, if I walk up to that group of 3 people already engaged in conversation and I introduce myself, who is this guy? Why is he coming in, butting into our conversation? He should just get out of here. That's the story that was playing in my head. And
Right.
Why on earth would they think that? They don't know me from Adam. I can be part of that conversation.
Of course you can. And just like it's almost this fear of judgment. And what I have learned myself, people don't really care about you. They're thinking about themselves more than they're thinking about you. And once you leave that experience, you may or may, most likely, you're probably not even going to be on their mind. But you're going to remunerate that. And it's the power that's like the mind's a movie theater. And you can sit there and remunerate and play a story over and over. And you can feel the emotion, even though it wasn't even real. I was leading a workshop just this past week with a team. And someone had shared with me, like, they were very afraid to go back and have to pick up some paperwork from a previous employer. I was like, well, what are you afraid of? They're like, well, it just wasn't a good place. I go, do you know that previous employer and that environment has power over you today because you're not showing up? Like, I've never thought about it. I go, how would you feel if you showed up, you did what you needed to do, and now you own the situation? Like, I've never thought of it that way. It's almost like we give agency, control. We give that to others. We give that power to others where we should be taking it back for ourselves, because we all have the power to tap into something greater than us. And that gives us courage. And that gives us confidence, because it moves through us to take things to a whole nother level that weren't possible if we were just trying to do this on our own.
You want to hear something strange? When I talk about it being in a room like that from years ago, what I would tell people is, if the speaker up and no-showed and they said, well, we don't have anyone to speak, I would have volunteered. I was much more comfortable in front of the room than I was in the room.
Really?
Yeah. Everyone talks about this. The fear of public speaking is one of the greatest fears there is. That was never my worry. I always had a lot of confidence to get up and, heck, I would wing it and it'd be fine. I'm good. I'll be fine.
Yeah.
But you're not in a relationship the same way.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where my fear was in that one-on-one, one-on-two, 1 to 100. That's not a problem.
Yeah.
Kind of bizarre, but that's where a lot of my growth has come, I think, as we talk through this.
Well, another, I'd say, area that I know of you that has impacted you as an entrepreneur, and it has led to both personal and professional growth, it's getting outside. You've traveled to 45 national parks. And here's the thing, dude. I've been to one.
Which one?
It's Big Bend down in Texas.
That is a great park, underrated.
And here's the crazy thing. I grew up in Texas. We went this past October, took the kids. Had no idea that A, Big Bend existed before we started to figure out what we're going to do with the kids. B, the drive from the Houston area out was absolutely gorgeous. My kids got so annoyed. They're like, Dad, we see the mountains. Because, I mean, I'm in the flat plains of Houston, you know, right on the Gulf Coast. But to see mountains in Texas that I had no idea existed, it was like, wow, it was truly, it's like that Aladdin song. It was a whole new world. And then when we get to the national park, we get to Big Bend, and to learn how it was a volcano that had blown out like Mount St. Helens. You've got this ridge up top, and then we went up all the way up to Emery Peak with the kids. It was a 12, 14-hour round trip, and first time that I've ever done anything like that, yet all of my kids, and we did that as a family. I mean, that was a core memory for everyone. So we've done it once. You've done it 44 times more than me. What have you seen?
Update, we've actually been to 46. The end of last year, we caught Mesa Verde in Colorado.
Okay.
The Indian that carved into the side of the mountain, the Native Americans. So it was a cool park to hit.
What have you seen? I mean, that's like you said, you've got one more now, because I'll come back with some of my thoughts, but I want to hear from you. How has this travel, and specifically travel to national parks, helped you see things differently as an entrepreneur?
It's funny. I mean, I even use some of this in my business language, is that you really want both having the right outfitter and the right trail guide, right? So I kind of put that back to the business world, is when you go to the parks, if you go to the place where every tourist goes, it's really safe. I mean, there's hundreds of people, everybody's around. But when you really start to do some of the longer hikes, the more adventurous stuff, you need to be outfitted well. You can get cold and rainy and you get hypothermia. You can get torched in the sun. You can get elevation issues. There's a lot of wild animals you can run into that you got to be careful for, right?
We had a bear in the area when we were out at Big Bend. We didn't see it, but we were warned of it.
We saw tracks as you crossed the river to go into Santa Elena Canyon. So I saw some bear paws, so yeah, they're there. But those are things you need to be outfitted with the right stuff when you leave. Because if you're 5 miles out on the trail, you're out of water, it's 92 degrees, that's the wrong time to start thinking about it. So like I have the straws that if I can drink gross water, it's going to clean it up, and we're fine, we can drink it. So the idea of having the outfitter, and business wise, you need the same thing. You need the tools to succeed, and it's part of why I'm in Strategic Coach. They have all kinds of thinking tools, right? Dan Sullivan likes to talk about thinking about your thinking, and when you run into a challenge, you run into something, that's where I'm outfitted with all kinds of tools. I go and work through one of their models and kind of think my way through my issue. And sometimes I have clarity. Sometimes I got to have somebody else talk me through it. But that's a huge part of you want that right equipment, but then you also need the trail guide, somebody to actually say, here's where the danger is. Here's what you want to avoid. There's something beautiful right on the other side of this. Having that as well on the business side, you have individual coaches, you have mentors, you have more seasoned people that are in your industry who can talk you through, guide you through, give you that advice and encouragement you need sometimes. So there's a lot of parallels to a trip to the business world. And I just think at the end of it, there's something beautiful, right? You talk about going up into the crater. That's something unlike almost anything you're going to see anywhere else in this country. My wife and I did a hike in Great Basin National Park a couple of years ago in Nevada. Very remote, very, very sparsely visited park. And so we did a 13.5-mile hike with 3,500 feet of elevation gain to this lake. We saw 2 hikers the entire time. We were completely by ourselves out there, but the serenity of being out there with nothing. I mean, you likely have several miles before the nearest human, and you sit there and have lunch in the sun by this lake. It's worth the work.
Yeah.
Business is the same thing. You sweat. Sometimes you bleed for it. It's frustrating. It's hard. It's tiring. But there's something beautiful when you fight through it and you get the rewards of all that work in the back end.
Well, I mean, that is the entrepreneurial journey. And I think about, whether you're either an entrepreneur, or B, you're working at an entrepreneurial organization, you're on that journey, you're on that hike together. And it's like I rewrote the old Robert Frost poem, Two Paths Diverge in a Yellow Wood. And my version is Two Paths Diverge in a Yellow Wood. And I took the trail down the middle to see what others don't get to see. And so when you're an entrepreneur, yeah, you get to see the things, or when you're working at an entrepreneurial organization, yeah, you get to see the things that others don't often get to see. On the flip side of the spectrum too, it can feel lonely sometimes. And, having that trail guide, I mean, that was the whole reason I started to Level Up Business. And it was, I couldn't see things in my own self, things that came naturally to me. It was other entrepreneurs pointing out, like, you've got this amazing skill, gift, talent. Why don't you go and help others do what you have done? And I resisted. I put it off. I'm like, yeah. And until it just became glaringly clear that, you know what? It was a matter of perspective. It was like being at Big Bend and going up to Emery Peak. And I literally took the pictures. And I don't know if I did this consciously, subconsciously. I'm so grateful, though, that I did it, because I took a picture when we hit the trailhead at the visitor center. And then we go out. And then as we're ascending, and it's about 7,500, 7,700 feet, if my memory is correct. Along the way, I keep taking pictures looking back at the visitor center as a point of reference. And it is like the coolest progression it's coming back to what we've learned in Strategic Coach. We measure progress, and we stop, and we look, and we review, and we reflect. And even along the way, like my third in line, he got scared, and I had to coach him through some of the rock scrambles and whatnot, but he did it. And when he got to the top, he just felt absolutely amazing. And he was like, oh, look at this view. I'm like, you're right. And so that's such a great perspective when it comes to your 46 national parks.
Yeah.
And how that applies back to where we're at today. And when we're thinking about perspective, a lot of your perspective is framed around what I think many find to be a very uncomfortable topic. And even entrepreneurs struggle with. Lisa Smith, we just had a great conversation with her about deserve level, which is money, finances, wealth. And you had shared a quote from Garrett Gunderson when he wrote, wealth is an emotion. It's a state of being more than a state of having. It's the ability to have peace, to be present, to live a life you love. And you shared, if you make wealth about having, the equation for achievement is always going to be a little more. So when we think about this idea of money, wealth, finances, particularly in the confusing and chaotic world that we're in right now, where's the opportunity, and this even gets back to the national parks, to shift our beliefs, to shift our perspective, to ascend, to see things at perhaps even a higher level, to think about wealth from a place of, quote unquote, having, to more of a place of just being?
I think we often take the perspective of we're not there yet, no matter what we have. And I think that's really what I was trying to get at with that post. And when you stop and think about it, do you have working HVAC in your house so it's always about the right temperature? Do you have indoor plumbing in your house where you can just hit this little switch and all of your waste leaves your house? You have electricity, you flip, and you have the magic of light inside your house 24 hours a day. You have a device in your pocket that you can look up any bit of information anywhere, anytime.
Yeah.
Right? That's incredible wealth. Louis XIV had none of those things, and he was revered as a demigod. We live 10 times the life he had. That guy got sick, he would have died. There was no penicillin. Like, we are incredibly wealthy, and we take it completely for granted. And we want more. We want more. You know, and that's just with the stuff, right? Like, so when you transfer wealth out of finances and you put it into, I have an amazing wife and 3 daughters. I'm healthy and getting healthier. You know, I have, great relationships with friends and colleagues. I have a growing spiritual life that I am consistently working on and trying to improve. Like, all these things are our wealth. Where I struggle and I don't have my answer here is I still want more of those things. I want to grow my business. I want to have a stronger and deeper relationship with my wife and my girls and my parents and my friends and God. And I want those things. But I have to have a contentment with where I am and to be settled in that at the same time that I pursue the more. And if I lose the contentment, you're never going to be happy. It's not going to, because more won't satisfy if more is what you think will. And I'm not there, but that's what I want.
Right. Well, but it's something too, and Dan Sullivan over at Coach has talked about this, and I started doing this myself. I want it because I want it. And I started writing down what I want because I want it. And I don't need to justify it to anyone else. I don't even need to justify it to myself. And I want to come back to your different dimensions, if you will, of wealth and even well-being, because I think wealth and well-being there's a bit of a play on the two. But I had my priorities all out of whack, and I was so over-indexed on and focused on the financial wealth and well-being that the other 4 really took a hit. But I've reprioritized, and my particular order of focus is I start with spiritual wealth and well-being. From there, I move into the physical wealth and well-being, so health. Then there is the mental wealth and well-being. Then there's the relational, and then there's the financial. Because it's like I've got to have a good, healthy relationship with God. I've got to have a good, healthy relationship with my physical body and my mental well-being. I got to have a good relationship with myself. I got to have a good relationship with those around me, my wife, my kids, my team here, my clients, my peers, my colleagues. And then I want a very good relationship with money, which I haven't always had. In fact, it's been a very unhealthy relationship over the years that I've been working to improve that relationship. So,
you know what that would make you? Normal. It's normal to struggle with that.
Yeah. And a lot of it goes back to how we've started this conversation, which is, interestingly enough, come full circle. A lot of it was my upbringing. It's my family of origin, and working to elevate that. I mean, it's interesting. Even like I'm looking at the shirt that I'm wearing today. I want to be a bloodline breaker. I want to give my kids an even better future, and not let the demons of my past have a negative impact on them. And so it's a lot of the challenges stops with me. Drawing a line in the sand. We're gonna create a new path forward. We're gonna climb. We're gonna ascend new mountains, new peaks, new ranges together as a family. So as we wrap up here today, Darren, coming back to how we started this conversation and what you posted on LinkedIn, in a world of doomsayers, choose to be hopeful and choose to be helpful which you have been today, and I'm so grateful for your unique wisdom that you have shared with us. What would you recommend someone who is watching or listening do next so that they can continue to ascend and level up on their journey of growth as a B2B entrepreneur?
To me, everything comes back to just continuing to take in the proper voices, whether it's your own, because we definitely have two voices.
Yes.
I won't name them the way Andy Frisella does. We'll keep this PG, but make sure you're listening and speaking to the right one. And the content that you take in, because it's, yes, you're getting additional information, but to me, what it serves as is its strength. You're persevering through the challenges of business because you're hearing these folks that have done it, that have been there, that have gone through it. And yes, there's tactics. Yes, there's strategies. Yes, there's all this great information. But it's just the encouragement of continuing to listen to these folks every single day. I am in the podcast world nonstop listening, and it just keeps me going and growing. So
I like that. It just keeps me going and growing. If someone wants to keep going and growing with you, what's the best way for them to connect, reach out, and say hello?
As you've mentioned, I'm on LinkedIn a lot. I really enjoy trying to share my journey there. And you feel free to connect with me, and then we can connect in any way from there. But that's probably the easiest way.
Why don't you do that? Why don't you just head over to LinkedIn, connect with Darren right now, tell him hello, send him a DM, and let him know one thing that you've taken from our conversation here today, number one. And number two, let him know what you're going to do next. What's one action that you're going to commit to do? Because it does come back to what we were talking about, Darren. You got to act.
Yeah.
You got to act. Otherwise, it's a bunch of knowledge. Once you put that knowledge into practice, that's where it becomes wisdom. And that's what we're doing over here is we're unlocking this wisdom from other entrepreneurs to help others continue to level up and grow. Darren, I'm so grateful. Thanks for joining me for another podcast, man. This has been a lot of fun today.
Thank you. Appreciate it. It's been great.
I want to thank you again for joining me for another Level Up Business podcast, because now's the time. Now's the time to stop letting your self-limiting beliefs hold you back from helping others by sharing your unique wisdom, just like Darren shared unique wisdom with us today. That's because there are people in this world right now. They need your help. They want your help. They need your authentic intelligence. Yeah, they want to learn from you. They want to watch your video. They want to read your best-selling book. So text me right now, 832-240-1922, and I'm going to show you how quick and easy it is to elevate your brand, to increase your revenue by turning video content into a best-selling book.